I'm Nick Snow, watching Government for Oil and Gas Journal in Washington, D.C. The federal government's partial shutdown didn't keep the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee from discussing the pending U.S.-Mexico Transboundary hydrocarbons agreement on October 1st. But the hearing barely mentioned the main obstacle to its being finalized. Chairman Ronald L. Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, twice mentioned his desire to see the treaty adopted, quote, quickly and cleanly, end quote, but did not specify what the main problem is. There obviously was one, since the hearing considered two separate bills. S-812, which Wyden introduced on April 25th, and H.R. 1613, which Representative Jeff Duncan, a Republican from South Carolina, introduced a week earlier, and the House passed on June 27th. It fell to one of the witnesses, Carlos Pascual, Special Envoy and Energy Affairs Coordinator at the U.S. Department of State, to explain the problem. While the Obama administration supports ratifying the treaty, it dislikes a provision in Duncan's bill, which would waive Section 1504 of the Dodd-Frank Act requiring U.S. companies to disclose payments to foreign governments. Duncan has said this is necessary to get U.S. companies to invest in joint ventures with Petróleos Mexicanos, Mexico's national oil company. Others argue that the hydrocarbons potential within the two countries' Gulf of Mexico maritime border may be enough to encourage the necessary outside investment if the U.S. ratifies the treaty. We believe the agreement would help facilitate the safe and responsible management of offshore petroleum reservoirs that straddle our maritime boundary and strengthen our bilateral relations overall, Pascual testified on October 1st. Mexico ratified the treaty soon after it was signed in 2012. Its new president, Enrique Peña Nieto, proposed energy regime reforms earlier this year that would allow contracts between Pemex and outside companies for the first time since 1938. By pulling back instead of advancing, it would be negative not only for the United States as a whole, but also for U.S. companies which would want to participate in a reformed Mexican energy system, Pascual said. U.S. producers would welcome the prospect of being able to reach unitization agreements with Pemex to develop border-straddling resources, according to U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management Director Tommy P. Boudreau, who also testified. The agreement also encourages Mexico and the U.S. to use common safety and environmental standards while preserving their sovereignty, he said. A third witness, American Petroleum Institute Upstream Operations Director Eric Melito, noted that API saw a sincere desire to move ahead when it hosted a delegation of Mexican senators in Washington recently. Swift implementation of the agreement would provide U.S. companies certainty. Congress will need to resolve whether to waive Dodd-Frank Section 1504 first, however. The Senate assured that a conference probably will be required when it passed S-218 on October 12th, without H.R. 1613's exemption. That's Watching Government for this week. In Washington, I'm Nick Snow for Oil and Gas Journal.